Hi, and welcome to the Free Your Spirit podcast. I'm your guide, Carole Frey, founder of Free Spirited Wanderer, a conscious wellness business of yoga retreats, lifestyle coaching, and yoga teacher mentorship. In this podcast, we explore conscious business, yoga on and off the mat, and general lifestyle. Our aim is to help you live a more fulfilling and purposeful life. Whether you're an entrepreneur, yoga student, yoga teacher, or simply someone looking to make positive changes in your daily life. Join us as we share insights, tips, and stories to inspire you on your path to a more free-spirited life. So sit back, relax, and let's embark on a journey of self-discovery, adventure, and expansion. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Free Your Spirit podcast. I'm your host, Carole Frey. In today's episode, we are going to discuss the importance of routine. And we'll start out with a little background on Ayurveda. This is the philosophy which I practice and teach routine from. I'll also talk about why I personally love routine and why I teach it on all of my retreats, what routine enables us to do, why morning and evening routines are equally important, and at the end, I'll share my number one tip for sticking with routine. So Ayurveda translates to the knowledge of life. Basically, it teaches us how to live well, and it is the sister science to yoga. It was also founded in India over 5,000 years ago, and it has the mythology of it comes through spirituality, meditation, routine, healthy habits, food as medicine, all these different practices that you learn how to implement into your life to thrive within your days. And Ayurveda teaches us that we are all unique. There is no one-size-fits-all life. We all have this true nature. And as we move through life, we find our own path and our own process, and we begin to discover what works for us. So there is this element of trial and error, trying something out, seeing how it feels, taking enough time to stick with it to see if it's going to work. But this also reminds us that we hold this power to make changes within our life whenever we see fit. So when we start to recognize that something is not working within our life, we are capable to make those changes. And Ayurveda gives us these tools, these techniques, these practices in order to help us make these changes and to really stick with these changes. So I really love that Ayurveda reminds us that we are all unique. And this is why I really connected with Ayurveda, because there wasn't this strict plan that you had to follow. And I loved that I could, kind of figure this out for myself and beginning to learn, what enables me to thrive within my days, and what works for me might not work for somebody else. And I think that that's super cool because it really teaches us, again, to honor who we are and honoring that we all are very different. And the other thing I love is that Ayurveda reminds us that we are not the victim to our circumstances. Again, we have this capacity to make these changes and to move through our life the way that we really do desire to feel, and to kind of create this life in alignment with our vision, with our truth, with where we desire to go. So Ayurveda really supports us within creating our life. It reminds us that we are the director of our own life. And I've just loved that. And I feel like that philosophy alone has allowed me to thrive because it's allowed me to be myself and to even learn more about what that means or who I am. And it's given me these tools to be comfortable with who I am, to accept myself, and to share that version of myself with others. And it also offers these very subtle practices. There are these subtle, simple practices with this huge, powerful impact. And this is also what is so beautiful, especially when we, move into figuring out a routine. And Ayurveda teaches to really add in one or two new things to our routine. So, we learn about a list of 10 or 20 things that we can do, and we start with one or two, and we start to get really grounded in that. We start to feel really good around that, and then we can start to add on more. And we all know what it's like when, we try to do too much right away, or we add too much on our plate, or we kind of cold turkey other things. So it reminds us to just take our time with this and to be very present with what we are doing. We don't have to do everything all at once. And that reminder that simple is powerful. Now, my first introduction to Ayurveda was in Nepal during my 200-hour yoga teacher training in 2014. And we did some Ayurveda 101. We started to talk about routine and healthy habits and, how the practice went right along with the yoga practice, how they were really held hand in hand. And we also talked about the doshas, which are our elemental makeup, and dosha translates to fault line. So it actually shows us where we have these imbalances within our body and within our life, and it teaches us how to find balance again. So it gives us these practices to find that balance, to come back to our natural rhythm and find harmony. And learning about your dosha is also a great way to get to know yourself. And, we see our patterns through dosha. I was learning, so I'm Pitta, I'm a fire sign, and starting to learn what some of my imbalances are, I was like, oh my gosh, that is so spot on. And so being able to recognize that and to, hold that with love and compassion when I am out of balance and I am experiencing, I like impatience or anger or, anything like that. So being able to hold that love and that compassion for that, and then also reminding myself, what do I need to do to come back to, to my true nature? What do I need to do to find that balance again? And we do this through, different food, exercises, mindfulness practices. So it's really powerful. And we won't get to dive into that too much on this podcast, but definitely another time we'll dive into the doshas. And if you are interested in learning more about it right now, head to Banyan Botanicals and you can actually take a quiz to figure out what your dosha is. So anyways, this was my first impression of Ayurveda was in Nepal at the teacher training. And I really did connect with it. Again, like I loved being able to learn a little bit more about myself and understand what some of these practices were. I loved the idea of like this food as medicine and discovering some of these herbs and all these basically like back to basic and natural approaches to healthy living, which was just something I was always interested in. And I loved the idea behind that. So that was my first introduction. And, I had these tools, I knew them, but I wasn't implementing them in my life the way that I could. So the reason why I love routine so much right now is because I did not have a routine. I wasn't using those practices. I wasn't, living up to my potential by following through with those Ayurvedic practices. So when we moved to North Carolina in 2015, I was teaching yoga right away as soon as we moved down here. And I was also working at Lululemon. And I was teaching a 9:30 a.m. class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I would wake up probably like 45 minutes before I needed to be there. And I don't even know how I functioned. And I would, wake up and rush through brushing my teeth, washing my face. I would chug a cup of coffee, probably eat breakfast that was like too big, and I hadn't digested it yet by the time I went to teach. And again, I don't know how I functioned. And then in the evenings, I would definitely stay up too late, probably drink cheap wine and eat, a pretty big dinner and watch TV late and just, do these things that I guess I thought I enjoyed, or it was like that quick pleasure. But it wasn't giving me that long-term pleasure, right? And I could start to notice what was going on in my body and that I wasn't liking the results. And I started to feel really tired all the time. I was so fatigued, and even getting through a class was like a lot for me. I had, some of my headaches, which I talked about in the first episode. A lot of those were coming back again. I felt very dehydrated all the time. My digestion was terrible, which also led to me feeling worse. So I just wasn't, again, living up to my fullest potential. I wasn't, I always said that I was healthy and, I still had my yoga practice and my meditation I was starting and reading books and, some of the other practices. But again, there was something that was missing and my body was telling me that. And it took a long time for me to wake up to the fact that I needed to make a change. Like this was not working for me and I needed to find something that was going to work for me. So this worked out well, I think, when I kind of really came to this realization and was like really committed to changing was 2017 when I found Ashtanga yoga. And when I found this in Charlotte and, I had to wake up at 4:30 a.m. to get to the 5:30 a.m. Mysore class. And now I knew about this Ashtanga program for like 2 years and I wouldn't go because I made up all these stories about how I couldn't wake up at 4:30 a.m. And I had to finally recognize that they were stories and what I needed to do was to make changes in my life so I could wake up at 4:30 a.m. So that is what I slowly started to do. And this is why I really love Ashtanga, because Ashtanga, it wasn't even just about the physical practice and, all these other amazing, parts of like just being in that physical practice and teaching me like the breath and everything else, even like that meditative state it brought me to. It was the fact that I realized I was being forced in a beautiful way to make all these other changes in my life. So it was a huge lifestyle shift. And it made me really stop and think about every decision, every choice that I was making, because that impacted my practice. And I could feel that in my practice, right? The evenings that I stayed up too late and drank that cheap wine and ate too much cheese in my pasta, like I could feel that in my Ashtanga practice. So I had to start to think about, okay, how can I feel a little bit better in this practice? I need to go to bed a little bit earlier. I need to not drink the cheap wine and eat the big dinner. So I started to really anchor back into these Ayurvedic practices, and Jana, my teacher, also teaches these Ayurvedic practices. And I feel like kind of early on of finding Ashtanga, there was also a workshop of hers that I took as well that just kind of reminded me why I loved Ayurveda in the first place. So yeah, like it forced me to make all these lifestyle changes. And Ashtanga really brought me back into Ayurveda and brought me back into my mind, my body, my spirit. And I started to feel more like myself again. So basically, the reason I love this routine so much and why I started teaching it to others was because of the big impact that it had on my life. Because I started to see these shifts and I started to realize that I was the only person that could make these changes. And all I needed was just the reminder that, I am the creator and the director of my life. I am powerful. I am capable. And I just needed to come back home to that to remind myself of all of those things. And as I began to see how much this was benefiting my life, I wanted to start to really share these practices with others. I wanted to bring it onto my retreats and do these workshops and series where I could introduce these practices to, other people. And just the feedback I've gotten over the years has been so incredible. And just, even months later of people coming back to me and saying, oh my gosh, creating this routine has shifted my life. Or, it's funny, I had a client I worked with for coaching for 12 weeks. And her biggest takeaway of the 12 weeks was this tongue scraping. And it's basically like this 30-second practice you do in the morning that removes all these toxins, this alma, we called it, that builds up overnight. It removes it from the body. And she started doing this first thing in the morning, 30 seconds, and it shifted her entire day. And she just said how accomplished she felt just by doing that. And I love that story so much. I tell it to everybody because it just shows you how these simple, subtle practices can have a huge effect on our life. And that ties right into what I want to talk about next, because routine enables us to do what we set out to do. So as you start to develop this routine, you start to find these practices and these things you want to implement, and you begin to achieve them, right? Like you move through it, just like the tongue scraping, that 30 seconds, you feel accomplished. Like, yeah, I just did that. First thing in the morning, I scraped my tongue, right? So we achieve these little tasks, and it shows us that we are capable to handle and achieve so much more. And it begins to set us up for success. It begins to, make us feel like ourselves again. And, I think a lot of us like to check things off of our to-do list, or to be like, okay, yes, I meditated this morning and I did my breath work and I did my lemon water, and to go through. And, when I go through my little checklist of my morning routine and I look at it, it makes me feel so good, because I think about, okay, I went to bed, the night before, and I made this commitment to myself that I was going to wake up and do my routine. I was going to wake up and meditate and journal and drink the lemon water, right? And when I make that commitment and I follow through with that commitment, I feel accomplished, right? I feel on top of the world. I feel limitless. I feel like I can do anything with the rest of my day. And this is what this routine sets us up to do. And I think that that is so cool, because, a lot of within yoga and Ayurveda, we learn something and, we see that it has a benefit. We know it's going to do something for our life. A lot of times I don't think we realize how that benefit spreads and expands and blossoms into something so much bigger, right? So it's like, okay, I set out today to scrape my tongue and to, remove the toxins from my body. And we do that one practice, and it opens up this path to do that in so many other areas of our life. And I just think that that is super cool. And it basically sets the tone for our day, for our life. And yeah, you feel like you achieved something, and it's a great feeling. So routine, like as we start to get more anchored into routine, Ayurveda calls this dinacharya, and this means following the rhythm of the day. Now, having this routine, you basically are reminding yourself that you matter, you hold value, your life has meaning, and you also add value to the world. And this is what this routine, this dinacharya, does. And dinacharya also is a great way to teach us how to align with the rhythms of nature. And it teaches us that when we are aligned with Mama Nature, we thrive. And when we are not aligned, we suffer. So a lot of these practices align with Mama Nature. So they're getting outside with her, waking up when the sun comes up with her, going to bed when the sun goes down with her. That's kind of the concept behind the routine as well, is aligning yourself. And now this morning routine is just this beautiful act of self-love. And we do these self-care practices in the morning that really wake us up, and they cleanse, rejuvenate, and regulate the body and mind. This morning routine sets you up for the rest of your day. And the way I like to look at it is I want to put myself in an empowered state. I want to feel unmessable with. And when I do these practices, I can get to those states. And if I have an upsetting email that I open up later and I've already worked on myself, I've found this like inner stability and peace and calmness within, I can handle that upsetting email so much better than if I had not done my morning practices. And for me, that's what I really anchor into. And the reason I know this is because I have woken up in the mornings and checked my email right away, or my text or Instagram, and there has been something upsetting or something I just wasn't, I blindsided myself with it and I wasn't ready to handle it. I wasn't awake yet. And again, I hadn't worked on myself. I hadn't given myself that time. And it's just really important, even if it's 5 minutes in the morning, to give ourselves that time to prepare ourselves for the rest of our day, to start to feel the way we want to feel. And if we can anchor into that first thing in the morning, we have a better chance of taking that with us for the rest of the day. day. Same thing when I teach my yoga classes and when we start in child's pose, it's find that breath now, anchor into the breath now, because it's so much harder to find it later in the practice, right? So we want to start the way we want to feel all the time. We want to start that way and not do it halfway through the day. And so that's what this morning routine does for us. Now, this evening routine sets us up for success for our morning routine. And I want to stress the evening routine a little bit more because everybody talks about morning routine, like everybody. And yes, it's super important, absolutely. However, if we do not have an evening routine, we don't have a morning routine, right? Our night can steal our morning away. And I'm sure we all know that as well when we've stayed up too late watching our favorite show or, having a snack too late or whatever else we do late at night. And we don't want to get up the next morning, right? We feel lethargic. We didn't get enough sleep. Our body is sore or tired. I'm sure we all know what this feeling is. So we remind ourselves to have this evening practice to unwind and prepare ourselves for a great night's sleep. So then we can prepare ourselves for a great day ahead. So these evening is really, really important as well. And I know a lot of people struggle with, going to bed at a reasonable hour or, just staying on Instagram or staying on TV. This is what we talk about a lot within my series and a lot of things that my clients bring up. And it's really hard to sometimes say no to that last episode. And again, we've all been there and it's okay. We hold grace for ourselves when it happens. However, when we have this evening routine and we kind of step away from the electronics and we eat earlier so our body has time to properly digest, we don't drink alcohol too late so we're not wired from that and we can actually get into that REM cycle of sleep. And we want to find this space basically to unwind and to reflect on our day and offer gratitude for it. And for me, it's been a really great practice to reflect on my day, to look back on hey, what went really well today? What offered me growth today? What am I grateful for today? And I share some of these things from Jonna Smith. She has this sadhana journal that I'll talk about more later, and she'll get to come on here and talk about it too. I'm so excited for that episode. And the sadhana journal has really changed my life. It's shifted my life, and it's helped me to stay grounded in these practices and to commit to these practices. So I love having that journal at night because it reminds me to take that space for myself to unwind and find that contentment, that I had within my day. And another thing too, it can be really challenging. I know a lot of people have a hard time, falling asleep at night, or sometimes our minds go kind of crazy. So when we are on the electronics too late, that doesn't help our mind to quiet down. So it really is moving more inward during that evening time so we can sleep well. And then same thing in the morning, we stay in that inward state and we work on ourselves. We find that self-care so we can then be set up for success for the rest of our day. And so I really do believe that these morning and evening routines are equally important because they really, without one, it's hard to have the other. And yeah, so they're equally important in my book. And the last thing I want to touch on within today of just speaking about the importance of routine is my little tip that has helped me stick to my routine. So this is my tip for you. If you struggle with routine, or honestly, wherever you are within your life with this, I think it's just a nice little reminder. So I always want to know my what. What am I doing for myself? And then what is my why? Why am I doing that? And I honestly think that why is the most important. That why is going to break down any resistance that comes up, right? We have this intention, this purpose, this direction, and we take the action to fulfill that when we know our why. So for me, my what is always waking up when the sun comes up. It's waking up, before the sun comes up, I wake up at 5 a.m. And I know on the days I wake up at 5 a.m., that is how I want to feel. That is the space I want to be in. And my why behind that is simply because I feel better during my day and I don't have to rush. And again, I remember back to when I didn't have a routine and I didn't wake up and I rushed and rushed and rushed, and I hated that feeling. I don't want to feel that way again. So what I've done is connecting back to my why. Why is it important for me to wake up? Knowing that for myself. And now on the days that I do wake up at 5 a.m. and I wake up and I do my routine, I do all my practices, everything I set out to do that morning, I anchor into how I feel. What came about from that routine for me? Do I feel more grounded? Do I feel expansive, empowered, energized, confident? So what are some of those words that I felt, and how can I anchor that into my body? How can I start to create a pattern of that and just remember what that feels like so I can come back to that? So when I struggle to get out of bed in the morning, because I will say it's not the easiest for me. I don't just pop up out of bed and I'm like this, little ball of sunshine. No, not at all. And that's also why I like having my mornings for myself. So basically when I kind of toy with that idea of, it'd be so nice to stay in bed. Maybe I can just skip Ashtanga today, or I can just skip my meditation and my practice. I have to come back to that feeling of why do I do this and how does it make me feel? And it could just be as simple as I feel really good when I do this. And now I also remember on the days that I don't get up when I want to get up, on the days that I do sleep in later, or I don't give myself enough time before I have to teach, I don't do my practices, and I normally feel rushed and I feel just not awake and I don't feel good. So I remember basically what both of these feel like. I remember how it feels when I wake up and do my routine. And then I remember how I feel when I don't wake up and don't do my routine. And now I get to choose the way I want to feel. I get to choose what path I take every morning. And of course, I always want to take, I want to feel good. I want to feel empowered, confident, energized. And again, we do have to hold grace for ourselves on the days that we don't do everything. And that is completely okay too. We'll talk about that later. And some days our body does need rest, and that's important to honor as well. But that is just my little tip that has helped me stay committed and has helped me stick to my routine, is basically creating that memory in my body of how each of those feel. And then I ask myself, how do I want to feel today? Okay, I want to feel good and I want to feel all these other things. What is going to enable me to get there? And it's not staying in bed and skipping all my spiritual practices. And this takes time. It does take time to do this, but if you're interested, I recommend trying this out and, just see how it feels. Now, we didn't really get to go into too much today of what you can do in your morning and evening, and we are going to dive into that next week. So next week, we have 8 steps to empowered mornings, and the following week, we'll do 8 steps to empowered evenings. So I'll start to give you some ideas, some of these Ayurvedic practices that you can start to bring into your life. And I'm really excited to share all of this with you and to continue to talk about this. Like I said, it's one of my favorite topics and just one of my favorite things to teach, because I love how it lights up other people inside. And I love that I get to share that with other people, because it's helped me. It's lit me up inside as well. So until we do those 8 steps to empowered mornings and evenings, and if you're not someone who has, a solid routine right now, or you're looking to have a routine, start with your what. What do you want to bring into your life? And then think about your why. So why do you want that? And your what could be, I want to wake up at 6 a.m. before my alarm goes off, or I don't want to hit snooze, or, I want to meditate 5 days a week, whatever that what is. So think about right now, what is your what? And then what is the why behind that? Because again, this why is your intention, and this why is going to help you stick to your what. Otherwise, we just do something because we think we're supposed to do it. And this is what happens in society a lot is society tells us, or they try to tell us, how we're supposed to feel and what we're supposed to do. And, if we do X, Y, and Z, we're going to be happy for the rest of our life, and we're going to be skinny and our skin's going to look amazing and we're going to be rich and all these things. And if we do some of these things and then we don't know our why behind them, if we start that keto diet and we're doing it because our best friend did it and it worked really well for them, and that's our only reason, it's not going to connect us back home to ourselves. It's not going to connect us to our truth. So we have to understand our why behind it. And that has been the most important part of my journey of finding this routine and figuring out, okay, this is my what's my why? And that is what has helped me stay connected. And then again, as I find that why, I anchor into the feeling that is the result of that why. And I think about, okay, how can I anchor that into my present awareness right now? It's almost like connecting to your future self and anchoring that in now, not waiting to feel the way you want to feel. It's beginning to start that now. So that is what I can offer for you right now in the meantime. And tune in next week for these 8 steps to empowered mornings. And as always, we have a new episode out every Thursday. So subscribe if you haven't already. And if you'd like to connect on Instagram or subscribe to my newsletter or just check out my current offerings, please do so below in the show notes. And I'm super grateful that you spent your time with me today. I hope that this offered you some light on Ayurvedic approach to routine, and perhaps just helped you dive in a little bit deeper to what that might look and feel like to you. So until next week, continue to show up as your truest, most authentic self. Thank you so much for being here, and have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are in the world.